The morning sun filtered through the small windows of Mercy's hair studio at Forward Operating Base Crescent Moon, casting a warm glow across the modest salon that had become an unlikely sanctuary in the middle of nowhere. Sergeant Grace Angel Morales sat patiently in the chair, while Alexandra Lexi Stone worked her magic with the scissors, trimming the regulation-length hair with the precise movements of someone who'd spent years perfecting their craft. Before continuing this story, please comment below with your city or country where you're watching from. Your feedback inspires us to do better. Earlier that morning, Lexi had been making her rounds through the base hospital, volunteering in the children's ward where families of deployed personnel often stayed during medical emergencies. She'd spent 2 hours reading stories to 7-year-old Maria Santos, whose father was serving his third deployment in hostile territory. When Maria had fallen asleep, clutching a small American flag her dad had sent, several nurses had wiped away tears. "You're like medicine for that little girl's soul," head nurse Patricia Williams had whispered. "She asks for you every day." But Lexi's good deed had made her late for her first appointment, and as she hurried back to the salon, she encountered the kind of casual dismissal that had become all too familiar during her 3 years on base. "Must be nice having such an easy job," Staff Sergeant Derek Morrison commented loudly as she passed the mess hall. "Playing with hair while the rest of us do the real work." His buddies chuckled appreciatively, the sound following Lexi like a cloud of cigarette smoke. She kept walking, her expression serene, but something cold flickered behind her hazel eyes, a glimpse of depths that none of them could begin to fathom. Now, as she carefully shaped Sergeant Morales' hair for an upcoming video call with her teenage son, Lexi's hands moved with the fluid precision that had made her the most popular stylist on base. Her salon was small but immaculate, decorated with photographs of smiling soldiers and thank-you notes from grateful customers who appreciated having somewhere to feel human in an environment designed for war. "How's Miguel doing?" Lexi asked, her voice carrying the warm interest that made people want to confide in her. "Growing up too fast," Grace replied with a mother's mix of pride and worry. 16 next month. Wants to enlist when he graduates." "They always want to follow in our footsteps," Lexi said softly, her scissors moving with practiced rhythm. "Whether that's wisdom or stubbornness, I've never been able to decide." The salon door chimed as 4 figures in desert camouflage entered, their gear bearing the subdued patches that marked them as members of Delta Force's most elite reconnaissance unit. Lieutenant Commander Jake Steele Harrison led the group, followed by Master Sergeant Tommy Dice Rodriguez, Staff Sergeant Carlos Phoenix Martinez, and Sergeant First Class Ryan Bulldog Chen. "Morning, Lexi," Steele said with the easy camaraderie that had developed over months of regular visits. "Got time for the breakfast club?" "For you guys?" "Always," Lexi replied, putting the finishing touches on Grace's haircut. "Give me 10 minutes to finish with the sergeant here, then I'm all yours." These 4 operators were legends on base. Over 60 successful missions in 18 months, with a reputation for getting in and out of impossible situations without losing a single team member. More importantly, from Lexi's perspective, they were decent human beings who treated her with genuine respect and appreciation. What they didn't know was that Lexi studied them with the intensity of a professional analyst. She absorbed their tactical discussions, memorized their operational patterns, and cataloged their skills with the focus of someone whose life had once depended on reading people with absolute accuracy. "Heard you boys are headed out tonight," Lexi said as she began working on Steele's regulation cut. "Anything interesting?" "Just a standard reconnaissance mission," Steele replied casually. "Intelligence gathering in the northern sector. Should be routine." "No such thing as routine in this business," Lexi observed, her tone light but her eyes showing genuine concern. "You stay sharp out there." "Always do, Lexi." "Always do." Those were the last words she exchanged with them before everything changed. At 02:47 hours, alarms shattered the pre-dawn quiet across a fob crescent moon, like glass breaking in a cathedral. Lexi woke instantly, her body responding to the sound with reflexes that had nothing to do with her civilian occupation and everything to do with training that lived deeper than muscle memory. She was dressed and moving toward the command center before her conscious mind fully processed what was happening. The base was in chaos. officers running between buildings, communication specialists shouting updates over static-filled radios, and the kind of electric tension that came with catastrophic news. Lexi slipped into the command center, her civilian contractor status and familiar face allowing her to move through spaces where she technically didn't belong. Everyone was so focused on the crisis that nobody questioned her presence. "Say again, what's the situation?" Colonel Marcus Steele was shouting into a radio handset, his usually composed demeanor cracking under pressure. "Delta Team Echo is down, sir," came the response from an Air Force controller monitoring drone feeds. They walked into what appears to be a coordinated ambush, approximately 60 clicks northwest of base. Last transmission indicated they were surrounded and taking heavy fire. "How many hostiles?" "Initial count shows 52 fighters, sir. Well-armed, well-positioned. The team is pinned down in a depression with no cover and no clear escape route." Lexi felt ice water flow through her veins, but her expression remained the picture of civilian concern. 52 against 4. Those weren't combat odds. Those were execution numbers. "What about extraction?" Colonel Steele demanded. "Negative, sir. The landing zone is too hot. Any helicopter insertion would be shot down before it could reach the ground. We have fast movers on standby, but we can't use close air support without risking our own people," Steele finished grimly. The communications specialist's voice crackled through the radio again. "Sir, we're receiving updated intelligence. All 4 team members have been captured alive. Enemy forces are using them as human shields in the center of their defensive position." The command center fell silent except for the hum of electronics and the distant sound of helicopters conducting security patrols. Everyone understood what this meant. 4 of America's most elite warriors were now prisoners of an enemy force that didn't believe in the Geneva Convention. "Options?" Steele asked his staff, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "We could attempt a ground assault," Major Patricia Williams replied, "but we'd need at least 200 soldiers to have any chance against 50 entrenched fighters. Assembly and movement time puts us at 8 hours minimum." "They don't have 8 hours," another officer interjected. "Intelligence intercepts indicate execution is scheduled for sunrise." "That's 3.5 hours from now." Colonel Steele slammed his fist on the table, causing coffee cups to jump and rattle. "There has to be something we can do. We don't abandon our people." "Sir," ventured a young intelligence officer whose voice hadn't lost its academy polish, "with all due respect, this mission may be impossible. We can't extract them. We can't assault with sufficient force, and these fighters don't negotiate. Those operators are already dead. We just haven't admitted it yet." Lexi listened to this exchange with the carefully neutral expression of a hairdresser who'd wandered into the wrong conversation at the wrong time. But inside, calculations were running through her mind with the precision of a computer designed for exactly this type of problem. 52 fighters, 4 hostages, mountainous terrain, 3.5 hours until execution. She'd faced worse odds before. 8 years earlier, somewhere in Eastern Europe. Captain Alexandra Phantom Stone crouched in the abandoned factory, her breath visible in the frigid air as she studied the target compound through her night vision scope. 12 hostages, aid workers who'd been captured by a particularly brutal militia group known for their creative approach to torture and propaganda. "Phantom, this is Control," crackled through her earpiece. "We count 37 hostiles in the building. Mission parameters have changed. You are authorized to extract any survivors, but primary objective is elimination of target leadership. In other words, save who you can, but don't let anyone escape to do this again." Copy, Control. Beginning infiltration. What followed was 47 minutes of surgical violence that would become legend in certain classified circles. When the smoke cleared, 37 enemy fighters were dead. All 12 hostages were alive, and Captain Stone had vanished into the night like a ghost who'd never been there at all. The after-action report was sealed so deeply that it required presidential authorization to access. But among the special operations community, whispered stories circulated about the Phantom, an operator who could appear anywhere, eliminate any target, and disappear without a trace. Until the mission in Afghanistan, that went wrong. Not because she'd failed. The target was eliminated perfectly. But because she'd been forced to choose between following orders and doing what was right. And she'd chosen right over orders. The CIA had given her two options: accept reassignment to a desk job analyzing satellite imagery, or disappear completely with a new identity and never work in the field again. She'd chosen to disappear, thinking she could leave that life behind and just be normal for once. Present day, FOB Crescent Moon. Lexi quietly left the command center and returned to her quarters, moving with the unhurried pace of someone who belonged exactly where she was going. She locked her door, moved to the back of her closet, and pulled aside a panel that had been carefully designed to look like standard military housing construction. Behind it was equipment that had no business being in a hairdresser's quarters: a custom-built rifle with suppressor and night vision scope, tactical clothing in matte black, climbing gear, communications equipment, medical supplies, and most importantly, identification documents that showed her real name and occupation before she became Lexi Stone, salon owner and weekend conversation specialist. Before she became the woman who cut hair and asked about people's families, she had been Captain Alexandra Phantom Stone, Special Activities Division, Central Intelligence Agency, one of the most effective covert operators in American intelligence history, specializing in impossible extractions and high-value target eliminations. She changed quickly, the familiar weight of tactical gear feeling like coming home after a long exile. The rifle fit perfectly in her hands, muscle memory from thousands of hours of training making every movement automatic and precise. But she couldn't just walk out of the base in full combat gear without raising questions. She needed to leave quietly, without anyone knowing she was gone until it was too late to stop her. Lexi packed everything into a duffel bag that looked like standard military issue, pulled on a hoodie over her tactical vest, and walked casually toward the base perimeter. She knew the guard rotation schedules, knew which sections had camera coverage, and knew exactly how to exploit the gaps that existed in every security system. 25 minutes later, she was outside the wire, moving through the darkness with the silent efficiency of someone who'd spent years learning to be invisible in hostile territory. The terrain was treacherous, rocky mountain paths that could break an ankle in daylight, let alone in the pre-dawn darkness. But Lexi moved through it like she was walking on a sidewalk, her night vision equipment turning the landscape into shades of green and gray, her mental map of the region guiding every step. 60 kilometers. In most circumstances, that would represent a 12-hour hike over mountain terrain in darkness. Lexi planned to do it in 2 hours. She ran, not the casual jog of someone exercising, but the brutal, ground-eating pace of someone who'd trained for exactly this kind of emergency movement. Her body protested. 3 years of cutting hair hadn't kept her in the same condition as her active duty days. But she pushed through the pain, knowing that 4 good men were counting on her, even though they didn't know it yet. At the 40-kilometer mark, she slowed to a tactical pace, knowing she was getting close to enemy territory. The drone feed had placed the team in a valley surrounded by hills, which meant the 52 fighters would have observation posts on the high ground. Lexi approached from the southwest, using terrain masking to stay below sightlines from the hilltops. She moved from shadow to shadow, her dark clothing making her nearly invisible in the pre-dawn darkness. Through her rifle scope, she could see the enemy position. They had set up a defensive perimeter around the valley floor with the 4 operators bound and kneeling in the center. Fighters were positioned in concentric circles, creating overlapping fields of fire that would make any conventional assault suicidal. Professional setup. These weren't random insurgents. They were trained soldiers who knew exactly what they were doing. Lexi counted heads methodically. 54 fighters, not 52. Intelligence had underestimated slightly. Not enough to change her plan, but enough to make it more challenging. She found a position on a ridgeline approximately 900 meters from the enemy position. From here, she had clear sight lines to most of their defensive positions, with enough elevation to see over their inner perimeter. Lexi set up her rifle with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done this hundreds of times before. Bipod deployed, scope adjusted for range and wind conditions, suppressor checked, magazine loaded with match-grade ammunition that she'd hand-loaded herself. She looked through the scope at the 4 operators. They were beaten but alive, showing signs of interrogation but nothing that looked immediately life-threatening. Steele was talking to one of the guards, probably trying to buy time or gather intelligence. The enemy commander was easy to identify. Older man, better equipment, positioned where he could see everything but protected by multiple layers of guards. He was checking his watch regularly. Sunrise was approaching, and with it the scheduled execution. Lexi's original plan had been to create a diversion, draw off enough fighters to allow the team to escape in the confusion. But looking at the setup, she realized that wouldn't work. These fighters were too disciplined, too professional. Any attack would just result in immediate execution of the hostages. She needed a different approach, something that would eliminate the threat so completely and so quickly that the enemy wouldn't have time to react. She needed to do what she did best. Lexi began identifying targets through her scope. First priority, the enemy commander. Second priority, fighters with crew-served weapons and radio equipment. Third priority, perimeter guards who could provide early warning. She mapped out a sequence, 26 shots to eliminate the command structure and heavy weapons, executed in under 2 minutes while they were still trying to figure out where the shots were coming from. It was an impossible shot sequence. Too many targets, too little time, too much precision required under difficult conditions. But impossible was just another word for Tuesday in Alexandra Stone's previous life. She controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to the familiar rhythm that marked the difference between a good shooter and a legendary one. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger, not pulling, just waiting for the perfect moment. The enemy commander raised his hand, signaling something to his troops. Execution was about to begin. Lexi fired. The suppressed rifle made a sound like someone coughing quietly. 900 meters away, the enemy commander's head snapped back and he dropped instantly. Before his body hit the ground, Lexi had already acquired her second target, the fighter standing next to him, trying to process what had just happened. Another shot. Another body dropping. The enemy position erupted in chaos. Fighters were shouting, looking around wildly, trying to identify where the shots were coming from. But suppressed rifle fire is nearly impossible to locate, especially in mountain terrain where sound bounces and echoes unpredictably. Lexi worked through her target sequence with mechanical precision. The machine gunner on the eastern perimeter, the radio operator trying to call for reinforcements, the lieutenant attempting to organize a response. 26 shots, 90 seconds, 26 enemy fighters eliminated before they even understood they were under attack. But she wasn't done. The math had changed. 54 fighters minus 26 still left 28 between her and the operators. Too many to handle with precision shooting alone. Time to get creative. Lexi packed her rifle and moved position, circling around to the northern approach. She'd brought more than just a sniper rifle. Her kit contained tools for exactly this kind of situation. Flashbang grenades, smoke canisters, and one very special piece of equipment she'd been saving for an emergency. A portable jammer that would disrupt all radio communications within a 3-kilometer radius. She activated the jammer and placed it where it would be difficult to locate. Immediately, all the enemy fighters' radios went dead. They couldn't call for reinforcements, couldn't coordinate their response, couldn't do anything but react to immediate threats. Then Lexi became the threat. She moved down from the hills like a force of nature, using smoke grenades to create cover and confusion. The remaining 28 fighters were scattered, disorganized, trying to protect the hostages while defending against an unknown number of attackers from an unknown direction. Lexi exploited their confusion perfectly. She'd appear from the smoke, eliminate 2 or 3 fighters with precise shots, then disappear before they could respond. The enemy kept firing at shadows, wasting ammunition and revealing their positions. Through it all, the 4 operators remained exactly where they were, bound and kneeling, but now watching with professional interest as someone systematically dismantled their captor's defensive position. "Whoever you are," Steele muttered under his breath, "you're my new favorite person." Lexi worked her way closer to the center of the enemy position, eliminating fighters one by one. The smoke was thick now, visibility down to just a few meters. Perfect conditions for close-quarters combat against a disorganized enemy. She found herself face-to-face with 3 fighters who were guarding the operators directly. They saw her emerge from the smoke, raise their weapons, and Lexi moved. Years of close combat training took over. She rolled left, avoiding the first burst of automatic fire, came up on one knee, and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. 3 fighters down in under 2 seconds. Well, that was impressive, observed Dice, the team's second-in-command. Lexi moved to the operators and cut their restraints with her combat knife. Can you guys move? Who are you? Steele asked as he grabbed a weapon from a fallen fighter. Someone who really hates seeing good people die, Lexi replied. We can do introductions later. Right now, we need to move. There are still hostiles in the area. Still hostiles? Phoenix laughed as he armed himself. Lady, you just took out like 40 fighters single-handedly. How many could possibly be left? 6 by my count, and they're regrouping near the eastern exit. We need to go west. The 5 of them moved as a unit, the operators falling into formation around Lexi like she was just another team member. They encountered 2 more enemy fighters trying to organize a counterattack. The operators handled them with brutal efficiency. They were 2 kilometers from the enemy position when the sun finally rose. Lexi could see the remaining fighters in the distance, searching for their missing hostages and trying to understand what had just happened to their supposedly secure operation. Okay, Steele said, as they paused to catch their breath. I need some answers. Who the hell are you, and where did you learn to do that? Lexi smiled, the same warm smile she used in the salon when discussing weekend plans. My name is Lexi Stone. I cut hair at FOB Crescent Moon. The 4 operators stared at her like she'd just spoken in an alien language. You're our hairdresser, Bulldog said slowly. Our hairdresser just eliminated 50-plus enemy fighters to rescue us. 54, actually. Intelligence underestimated slightly. Dice started laughing, the kind of laughter that comes from surviving impossible situations. This is insane. We've been getting haircuts from a one-woman special operations unit for 3 years, and nobody knew. That was kind of the point, Lexi said. I was retired, past tense, until you guys got captured and I couldn't just let you die. Retired from what? Steele asked. That's classified. Or at least it was. I'm guessing my cover is pretty much blown at this point. They made it back to FOB Crescent Moon as the sun was fully up. The base was still in crisis mode, with officers organizing the rescue operation that Lexi had already completed. Colonel Steele was in the middle of briefing his assault team when someone shouted, Sir, the operators are back. They're at the main gate. Everyone rushed outside to see the 4 captured Delta Force operators walking through the gate, armed and apparently healthy, accompanied by a blonde woman in tactical gear that most people didn't immediately recognize. That's not possible, someone muttered. They were surrounded by 50 fighters. Colonel Steele approached Steele. Lieutenant Commander, what happened? How did you escape? Steele gestured to Lexi. We didn't escape, sir. We were rescued. By her. Everyone turned to look at Lexi, and slowly recognition dawned on their faces. Is that Lexi? Our hairdresser? Not just a hairdresser, apparently, Colonel Steele said, his trained eye recognizing military-grade equipment and the bearing of someone with serious combat experience. Ms. Stone, I think you and I need to have a conversation. A classified one. 3 hours later, Lexi sat in a secure conference room with Colonel Steele, a representative from the CIA who'd arrived via emergency transport, and a very confused base intelligence officer. So let me get this straight, the CIA representative said, reading from a file that had just been delivered via secure courier. You're Captain Alexandra Stone, former Special Activities Division, with over 80 successful missions in hostile territory. You were one of our most effective operators before you requested reassignment to inactive status 4 years ago. That's correct, Lexi confirmed. And you've been working as a hairdresser at this base for 3 years without anyone knowing your real background. Also correct. Why didn't you tell us? Colonel Steele asked. We could have used someone with your skills. Because I was done with that life, Colonel. I'd completed enough missions, seen enough death, made enough impossible choices. I wanted to be normal for once. Cut hair, have conversations about weekend plans, just exist without constantly looking over my shoulder or calculating kill zones. What changed? The CIA representative asked. 4 good men were going to die. Men I knew, who had treated me with respect and kindness for 3 years. I couldn't just let them be executed when I had the skills to prevent it. Colonel Steele leaned back in his chair. You eliminated 54 enemy fighters single-handedly in under 4 hours. That's not just skills, Mrs. Stone. That's legendary. I did what needed to be done. The question now, the CIA representative said, is what happens next? You broke cover, revealed your identity, and conducted an unauthorized military operation on foreign soil. Technically, that's a lot of violations. Lexi met his eyes steadily. Are you going to arrest me? Arrest you? Number. We're going to offer you a choice. You can go back to inactive status with a new identity in a new location, or you can return to active duty. Based on what you just accomplished, I think we both know which option serves the country better. I choose inactive status, Lexi said immediately. The room fell silent. You sure? Colonel Steele asked. After what you just did, you want to go back to being a hairdresser? I want to go back to being normal. What I did last night wasn't who I want to be. It's who I had to be for a few hours to save lives, but that's not my identity anymore. The CIA representative closed his file. Very well. We'll arrange a new identity and relocation. You'll have to leave FOB Crescent Moon, of course. Too many people know now. I understand. As the meeting concluded, Steele appeared at the door. Sir, permission to speak with Miss Stone? Colonel Steele nodded, and Lexi stepped outside with the team leader. The guys wanted me to thank you, Steele said. We owe you our lives. You don't owe me anything. I'm just glad you're safe. Lexi, or whatever your real name is, what you did was incredible. You're a better operator than most of the Special Forces soldiers I've worked with. I appreciate that, but I'm done being an operator. I just want to cut hair and talk about weekend plans. Steele smiled. For what it's worth, you gave a damn good haircut too. Best I ever had. 1 week later, Lexi Stone disappeared from FOB Crescent Moon. The official story was that she'd been recalled for a family emergency. Most people accepted this without question. The 4 operators knew better, but they never talked about what really happened. The mission was classified at the highest levels, the after-action reports were sealed, and the truth about the hairdresser who eliminated 54 enemy fighters remained a secret. But something unexpected happened in the days before Lexi left. Word had spread through unofficial channels, not the classified details, but enough for people to understand that their hairdresser had done something extraordinary. Soldiers who had barely acknowledged her before now looked at her with newfound respect. Some wanted to ask questions but didn't know how. Others simply nodded in silent recognition when they passed her in the corridors. The base commander quietly recommended her for a classified commendation that would never appear in any official record. The CIA representative who'd offered her return to active duty left his card with a simple message. When you're ready to stop pretending. Lexi spent her final days at FOB Crescent Moon doing what she'd always done. Cutting hair, making small talk, being normal. But now she understood something she hadn't before. Being normal wasn't about hiding who she was. It was about choosing who she wanted to be. On her last day, the 4 operators came to the salon together, not for haircuts but to say goodbye. We're going to miss you, Steele said, speaking for all of them. I'll miss you guys too, Lexi replied, genuine emotion in her voice. One question, Dice asked. When you were cutting our hair all those times listening to us talk about missions and tactics, were you analyzing us? Lexi smiled. Every single time. Force of habit. You guys are very good at what you do, by the way. Not as good as you, Phoenix said quietly. Different skills for different purposes, Lexi corrected. You save people as a team. I used to save people by being alone. Your way is better. Bulldog handed her a small box. We wanted you to have this. Something to remember us by. Inside was a custom-made pin, the Delta Force symbol, but modified with an engraving on the back. Phantom, from the Breakfast Club. Phantom? Lexi asked. It's what we're calling you in the classified reports, Steele explained. The operators who reviewed your mission footage couldn't believe one person did all that. They said you moved like a phantom. I prefer Lexi, she said, but she kept the pin. 3 months later, in a small town in Oregon, a new hair salon opened. The owner was a friendly woman in her early 30s with honey blonde hair and hazel eyes that seemed to notice everything while appearing to notice nothing. Her name was Sarah Mitchell, and she was just a hairdresser. But in a secure facility in Virginia, there was a file with her real identity and a single notation: inactive status, available for recall in case of emergency requiring impossible operations. Because some skills never really retire. They just wait quietly like scissors in a drawer, ready to be picked up again when someone needs cutting. The customers at Sarah's salon in Oregon had no idea that the woman cutting their hair had once been one of America's most effective covert operators. They just knew she gave great haircuts, remembered everyone's name, and always asked about their weekends. And that was exactly how Sarah, formerly Lexi, formerly Captain Stone, wanted it. Until the next time four good people needed someone willing to pick up something deadlier than scissors. If you've ever hidden your most impressive skills because you just wanted to be normal, remember Alexandra Stone. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones who choose to be ordinary, right up until the moment when extraordinary is exactly what the situation demands. The hairdresser who saved four operators proved that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone thinks is harmless. And sometimes the person cutting your hair has eliminated more enemy fighters than most soldiers ever see in combat. But you'll never know unless someone needs saving. And by then, it's already too late for everyone except the people she's protecting. In her new salon in Oregon, Sarah Mitchell kept the Delta Force pin in a locked drawer beneath her station. On quiet evenings after closing, she would sometimes take it out and remember the night she stopped being a hairdresser and became Phantom again. She didn't miss the violence. She didn't miss the constant vigilance or the weight of impossible decisions. But she did miss knowing that her skills could save lives when it mattered most. One day, perhaps someone would walk into her salon needing more than a haircut. Someone would recognize the way she moved, the way her eyes automatically cataloged exits and threats, the way her hands never quite forgot their training. Until then, she would cut hair, remember names, and ask about weekends. Because sometimes the greatest act of courage isn't picking up the weapon. It's putting it down and choosing to be ordinary, knowing you could be extraordinary whenever the world needs you to be.